Welcome all to the Politics of Cinema. On this particular show, we believe that films are never neutral. There's a political as well as artistic message captured in every film, and we're on the lookout for all of it. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Isaac Miller, and on this episode, we are finishing up our October Romero Fest with the Romero Roulette, where we each take a look at some films from George Romero's extensive filmography. Do we even know what each other watched? Actually, we totally do, because we talked about it. But that's okay.
Well, pre-production is fine.
Yeah, but we're supposed to pretend that it's not. Like, this is fun.
Oh, I didn't know that was the gimmick. My bad.
I don't know what people...
I wonder what Isaac watched.
I just don't know.
Well, before we start talking Romero, Isaac, what have you been able to watch anything that isn't Romero since we last hit record?
Yeah. I have. I mean, I'm in this grad school thing where I don't really get to, watch as much. But let's see. I didn't catch
Horror, though. Horror, remember?
horror. Well, I mean, yeah, obviously.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think
you got to be on theme.
I've talked about a bunch of the stuff I watched so far this week. I finally got to watch Curse of the Cat People. From the
Nice.
from the great Val Lewton run of RKO horror movies. I think it's one of the last ones I haven't seen. Val Lewton was the producer, and these are sort of a different model of horror movies from the sort of from the Universal monster styles. They're more psychological because they didn't have a budget. But Curse of the Cat People is great because it's functionally not a horror movie. It's about the child of the two people, the hero and heroine of the last movie, who befriends the ghost of the Catwoman who comes because she's a lonely child. So it's really just about imaginary friends and the loneliness of childhood. But like they add a little horror end on there just to sort of like justify the name of The Curse of the Cat People. But it's
Right.
It's really good. I mean, it's really just, it really captures a lot, and I kind of love it. I mean, I don't just. And then, next month is a very exciting month, I think, for many, many movie fans and all of, and I, including myself, because it's Noirvember, the month where you watch lots and lots of noir. And I started early by watching some horror noir.
Ooh, like what?
So I watched Clyde Barker's Lord of Illusions, which I have to admit is actually the first Clyde Barker movie I've ever seen. I've never seen, Hellraiser. I admit it.
Oh, really?
This could have been the year. This could have been the year. But I didn't.
I just watched Hellraiser for the first time last October, so
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It frankly doesn't totally work. It's really a frustrating movie because it has everything that I would want to like, but it just doesn't quite come together. It slows down. I also just don't think Scott
Bakula
really pulls off the noir thing completely. He's there. But
I can kind of agree with that. Actually, it's weird you say that it slows down because I just recently watched it too, and I was thinking it needed to slow down to kind of build a little bit more of the world that it's playing in. Like it needed a bit more atmosphere and some of the environment. I don't know. There was a couple scenes where I was like, "Oh, we're just moving this quickly with this relationship. We're diving. Okay, all right."
You know what? Maybe you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. It's because I think it's that you feel like it's slowing down because it's not giving you enough to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say the pacing is off.
Okay, yeah.
And what should be in there isn't there. I mean, well, part of it is that you have this whole thing with like Scott Bakula and the at the very beginning of the movie, he's like dealt with an exorcism, like it's in the newspaper. Doesn't really come up. Doesn't seem to be part of his background. Like he clearly is supposed to be someone with some experience with these sorts of things, or that means something, or that's his trauma at the very least.
Yeah.
And it's not worked with at all, which means he's sort of like a blank slate of a guy,
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it takes you through the story because he's the audience character, but yeah, I guess, yeah, he is kind of set up as more of like a cult slash multi-religious kind of expert.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, yeah.
But they don't use it. They don't really use it, or even not even just expert, someone who's been scarred by this and now he's going back in. I don't know, something.
Yeah, he's just been around. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you need, well, because you were telling me you were comparing it with Angel Heart,
which is the other movie which is my other horror noir.
Yeah.
So I just watched Angel Heart, which I gotta say, Mickey Rourke, there's a noir guy, right?
There's a grizzled guy who's seen some shit and has some scars.
I mean, even before everything that happened to him in the 90s and 2000s happened. So this is like Mickey Rourke right at the tail end of his like 80s run where, you
That's a
can
good
bring
point.
you can bring him in as sort of a hottie. Like the whole movie he's like seducing people. Um
That's a good. Yeah, he really. I haven't seen that one in a while, but yeah, you're right.
yeah, it's like functionally a different person in terms of appearance, right?
Yeah,
But it's also, but yes, do you believe that he's a scarred, broken person?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for
like
sure.
you totally buy him as a Noir, and then a Robert De Niro playing an unnamed villain that I won't spoil, but like you'll figure it out within 5 minutes. And I think it's by far the superior supernatural noir. I don't know if it's good. I haven't made up my mind, but it's definitely got a lot going on there.
Mhm.
Um, and with both of these, I love the idea. I absolutely love the idea. I mean, these are genres that should live together a lot more.
Oh, for sure.
Um, Especially, with noir, sort of the inexorableness of your failings and the unavoidability of fate. Like, yeah, right.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, those are sort of my highlights. Trying to remember if there's anything. Yeah, I know. I think that's most of the non-Romero-y stuff that I watched since our last episode. How about you?
I um I had a 4-day weekend, so I actually got through quite a bit. I guess I should probably shout out. I finally watched House from '77 for the first time
Oh hell yeah! Ah,
because we were talking on a previous episode when we did when we did Martin, the last episode,
mm-hmm.
and about how like 1977 was such a stacked year for horror internationally speaking. I honestly don't know what to say about House. Everybody should watch it. That's that. And I thought it was interesting. A movie I'd watched before watching House, which was also from '77, Deathbed, The Bed That Eats, I think would make a really wild, melt your brain double feature of I don't quite know what I watched, but I think it's art and really saying something.
So I'm
House
fairly.
is better. House is better. I'll say that.
Uh, they're not actually in the same league at all.
But just they gave me the same like just bonkers kind of vibe while watching it.
They both involve things that shouldn't be able to eat you trying to eat you.
Right. One is a house. Well, I mean, it's more than just a house, but like, and one is a bed with a guy trapped in a painting that narrate. I don't know. I still haven't really figured out each one. Also, with Deathbed, I was several beers into my evening when I hit play on that one. So I was like, I feel like I'm in the right mindset for this movie. And then I was like, what the hell am I watching?
That
I thought it was
alone.
just gonna be some shitty movie about a bed that eats people.
I mean, it is, but it
Well,
also.
yeah.
But the thing about Deathbed is, I love it.
Hmm.
It's kind of dull sometimes. It certainly doesn't make any goddamn sense. Um,
Right.
but it's sort of got like a sort of Manos the Hands of Fate vibe in which you feel like somebody really wanted to make this fucking movie, and I'm sure if
Yeah.
they,
Yeah. Like there's like a reason behind it, but I don't know what that was.
yeah, because somebody had a real idea. I think it's considerably better than Manos the Hands of Fate, but um,
Yeah.
it's wild. Whereas House, yeah, when I watched it, I couldn't figure it out either. It's like masterpiece level in what it does, but it's so what I would really suggest is look up some of the extra features on the
Oh,
Criterion
yeah.
channel because that actually, I mean, then you're like, oh, the thematics that I can't pick up on, and then it's
Right.
like, oh, this movie's actually really powerful and devastating.
Because
Um,
there's even on Criterion, there's like I think it's like a 40-minute interview with Obayashi, I think is his name,
mm,
the director.
yeah,
And yeah, he gets into that. But there's other people to give an analysis. And you had told me to check out some of that stuff before watching it. So I kind of had that in my brain going in.
yeah. I mean, basically, World War II is going to overshadow a lot of things in Japanese cinema for a long time. And when you think about it that way, and what happens to the
Mhm.
characters, it gets really
Yeah.
a lot.
And it's also like every cinematic trick you can think of is used in that movie.
Yeah,
And it works,
yeah.
which is pretty wild. But anyway, yeah. Um, so one of the ones that I watched that's really stuck in my head, which is weird because I wasn't expecting it, is Halloween Kills.
Hmm.
And I'd watched the trailer. I'd stayed off. I didn't look at anybody's reviews on Letterboxd or even like its profile to see how the reviews were going. So I watched it. I kind of loved it. I thought it was really like it was everything I was kind of assuming was going to be in a Halloween sequel. And then I started checking out reviews and I was like, wait, people don't like this movie? And then I started reading some of the negative stuff, and I was like, okay, yeah, I get that. That's there, but I liked that part of it.
Hmm.
And I think here's the reason I think I was primed for it. I think it's a great combination or mashup, if you will, of John Carpenter and Romero. And since we've been watching a lot of Romero stuff, I was like, there's a lot of strong Romero themes in here.
Interesting.
It's also a complete, I know it's the timeline for this is like Halloween from like 78 happens, and then Halloween 2018 happens, and then Halloween Kills. Like that's the timeline narrative wise they're going with. So they're ignoring Halloween 2 with, Laurie and Michael are actually brother and sister and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
But this one, I watched Halloween 2 again after watching Halloween Kills, and I was like, oh my God, it's just a Halloween 2 remake, but without the whole brother sister thing. So some of the complaints were like, Laurie's barely in. This one was like, well, she got stabbed in the gut. She's in the hospital. Like, I get it. Like, give her a minute.
Right.
So it takes that sting. But the Romero part was a lot of the people were giving him shit for this whole "evil dies tonight" chant, and there's a whole section of like the mob.
Mm.
The town mobs up and goes after Michael.
Which is also in Halloween 2, in the original Halloween.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is like a Halloween 2 companion piece or remake, which I was like, yeah, this is the second one in their trilogy. So also, I feel like it's fairly not new, but I think it's a fairly novel idea to have a studio doing like, we are doing a trilogy of horror movies. Now, obviously, horror movies have spawned franchises, including Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, as we mentioned before, Hellraiser. Like, there's a lot of those, but this is planned to be a trilogy and then done. Like, that's it. That's what we're doing with this particular story.
Mm.
So it has all the hallmarks of like a second movie in a planned trilogy, I think. Like if you spread this out between Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends, and you did it as like 6 1-hour episodes as a series on Netflix or Amazon or wherever, you'd have these middle episodes where like the story expands a little bit and more characters come in, and you have these little other arcs that are working out. But I don't know. I really dug it, and the Romero themes are that mob getting together to take on Michael Myers is a Romero theme. Like, all of his masterpieces, which we're going to be getting into as we talk about some of the Dead stuff and his other movies, this particular episode, but like, it's humans trying to get their shit together and get organized to face off an impending threat, which is Michael in this case. And what happens to all the Romero movies? It doesn't work. The humans are the problem here, as we've, I think, already mentioned a couple times. Slow moving zombies. That shouldn't be hard. Let's get organized. Let's take care of this.
I mean, here's the thing: is Shauna the Dead, which I think is one of the great zombie movies ever, is Shauna the Dead one of the more unrealistic ones because they actually pull it together and then stick them on game shows?
No.
Oh no! Well,
I think it works, right? Yeah,
it works, but now in our COVID era, Romero feels all the more relevant.
Oh, for sure. I actually have some notes on that in just a minute, but well, and then this one too, you also get these 1978 scenes, which I in my head I keep calling them bonus scenes because there's flashbacks to what else was happening that we didn't see in the original on that night from the police point of view. Like, and I was like, it looks like, and then I watched actually Halloween 2, and then I was like, you know what, I didn't watch the original Halloween this Halloween season, so I threw that one on a few days ago, and I was like, they got the look down perfect, I thought. So there's these like throwback scenes to 78 where you see what else Michael was doing and what else the cops were doing that we didn't see in that original one because we stayed with Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode. So like there's these like extra bonus scenes that I thought fit in perfectly. And so here's the other Romero connection is in my head. It's called Halloween Kills, and it's very appropriate because Michael kills a lot of people in this one. And what they did was there's a little bit of small talk. It's very economical script because you get introduced to these different characters, which I felt connected to very immediately because they have very unique dialogue at different situations to these. I don't want to do any spoilers because people haven't really seen it, but like these people that are going to end up just being victims of Michael Myers. Like in the movie, there's a new occupants in Michael Myers' old house. Well, he's not going to let them live, obviously. He's always returning to his childhood home. So the impending doom for them is pretty evident. But all these scenes, like they're not really long scenes. They give it maybe 2 to 5 minutes. And the way the dialogue goes and the way they develop these characters right away are like, I could watch, a movie with these as supporting characters. Oh, okay. And they're getting offed right now. So like they immediately endeared me to these characters. So there was actually like a bit of an emotional weight as he was going through and just offing all these people. The way Romero does, like he can get you endeared to his characters when you're supposed to be endeared to his characters very quickly and very economically with the right dialogue and the right situations.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know, I thought I did well. So maybe I was just primed because of we're watching so much Romero, but
I'm gonna
I dug it.
I'm gonna have to check it out. You know, the first one in the new Halloween, it I liked it. It didn't. I have to watch it. Maybe I'll just watch them again back to back in a few months when I'm like ready for more horror movies. So yeah, I'm curious.
I mean, I don't want to hype it up too much. It's not film of the year, but I was like, I had a great time watching it, and then I checked in, and it was one of those reactions where like, wait, did everybody watch the same movie? Like, and there were people that like love the Halloween series, and critics I know that are like big Halloween fans that were like 1 star. I was like, I feel like you're going to reevaluate this because also if Halloween Ends really sticks the landing for a trilogy, that's the perfect time people are going to be like, oh, that's what they were doing with Halloween Kills. Like, I don't know. I think it's pretty obvious, but whatever.
You heard it here, folks. Aaron is declared he will be vindicated.
I will. I will. I also, I had before Jim and Romero, I had a quick book recommendation. I've almost finished up. That's perfect for this particular month. Because what was the one you mentioned with Martin and Pittsburgh last episode?
Oh, The Next Shift.
The Next Shift. This one is a really interesting mix of politics and cinema, so obviously perfect for the show here. It's called Leatherface versus Tricky Dick: The Texas Chainsaw Massacre as Political Satire by Martin Harris.
Interesting.
It's a really interesting read because actually I'm listening to it on Audible, but it's an interesting read because it's what it says. It's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a political satire, written, produced, filmed, edited, everything in the era of Nixon and Watergate. And some of his analysis, I think, is the example of like what film criticism can do, where you're like, I think you may be reading a bit too much into that particular scene. But then the next, I would say page, but I'm listening to it, 4 minutes later, I'm listening to it. I'm like, oh my God, that analysis is spot on, which really just means I agree with him. But
which is all that really matters, right? So,
right. But it goes through the way it goes through it. It's almost like it's written almost like a director's commentary, like it's minute by minute, scene by scene. And it's doing comparisons, and there's all this. I know there's interesting Watergate analysis and Nixon in general, and all that. But I don't know. It's pretty perfect. And once I finish it up, I'm going to rewatch Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And never a bad. Well, actually, there's probably a lot of bad times to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it is a masterpiece, and it's funny. There's very few '70s horror movies that actually like freak me out.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember, I've done a lot of remedial watching over the last few years. And when I finally watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I was like, no, I actually feel really uncomfortable going to the basement right now.
Yeah.
It's like, this is, yeah.
Oh, you know what? Actually, speaking of that was one other thing. I watched Halloween Kills like quite late at night, and then I went right to bed, and I had nightmares. So effective.
Nice.
I mean, nightmares that I was being stalked. I don't think Michael Myers wasn't in there, but I was like, okay, that was clearly because I just watched that horror movie. All right, well, that's a good catch up for what else we've been watching, but we have some Romero films to talk about. Isaac, what was the first one that you watched for this particular Romero Roulette episode?
What I sort of explored was sort of the tail end of, I guess he was still doing stuff for Orion Pictures, right? I mean, this deal in the 80s. I might be getting this wrong. So what I watched was, I watched two Romeros, and the first one I watched was Monkey Shines.
A man trapped by his own body.
To Alan, to the start of his new life.
So you train monkeys exclusively for quadriplegics? How about if I were to donate a monkey?
She hasn't been exposed to anything weird in the lab.
No.
An animal trained to follow commands.
How am I supposed to take care of it, Jeff?
The idea is that it's going to take care of you.
She's unbelievable. She's like a miniature person. Get rid of that bird, or so help me.
One with the mind for revenge.
I've been so full of anger. I've had the most horrible thoughts lately.
I made up a formulation based on human memory cells I've been injecting one of my monkeys.
I don't like this change in you, Alan.
The other with the instinct to kill.
What the hell are you doing to her? Ella is getting out of the house, and I'm getting out with her.
You do know that that's impossible.
Man is the only animal capable of murder.
Ella, no!
Until now.
She did it for me. Did it because I wanted it done. Stop it!
From the director of Night of the Living Dead, George A. Romero, the master of terror and suspense.
You're not gonna hurt me. I'm part of you.
Monkey Shines, a new into terror.
It's an adaptation of a novel. It involves, I believe, a capuchin. I don't know, but a very small monkey who has been brought in to help a quadriplegic, basically a man who in the film is hit by a car and apparently apparently has been basically can't use any of his body except for his head. Has been brought in by his friend and a woman who trains monkeys to do these things to sort of help him around the house.
Yeah.
He can be trained to do this. But unbeknownst to anyone involved, his friend has also been experimenting on this monkey so that it's now hyper intelligent and is also able to establish a psychic link with our hero.
Nice.
In which they both, at least he increasingly gets angrier and angrier. And one, I'm going to say this, it's really hard. And yes, eventually the monkey turns jealous and evil. I mean, isn't really clear, like, is the monkey in love with him? It kind of seems that way. Like they're super bonded, or it's the attachment of a pet has reversed around, or it's like literally almost romantic.
Well, once you have a telepathic link too, like that's an extra kind of close relationship.
But here's the real problem here for me is that is a really cute monkey. And it is just really hard to take it seriously being like, I mean, it's like a real monkey, right? And, a trained monkey. And it's like, it's kind of adorable. Like, it's really hard to view this as a threat. I'm trying. I'm really trying.
Right.
But look at it. I literally just called up a picture and it's just, look at its eyes. You're just like, oh my gosh. You can try to kill me with a razor blade whenever you want. Or throw a household appliance into the bath when I'm in there so it electrocutes me to death. Whatever. Anyway, the thing about it is this. It certainly has... I think there's a lot of people who would sort of think of our main character and his love interest, who's the trainer, as pretty bland. They do kind of look like Ken and Barbie dolls.
Okay.
Nonetheless, I actually like their dynamic. I mean, I think it's actually kind of how do I put this? It's his trademark ability to, like, I think actually do a lot of economical character work. Like their chemistry actually totally works for me.
Okay.
And I think that says a lot about a movie which really doesn't totally hold together. Well, here's the thing: is the chemistry works, right? So him and his friend who's betraying them, I believe their relationship. It's not a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff in this movie is kind of cartoony. The main character's like over controlling mother is a bit of a cartoon. Like you can believe the dynamic, you can sort of, whatever, but like she's a little bit too much. There's look, it doesn't thematically, like, I think there's people who probably analyzed this movie to death and pulled a lot of stuff out of it, but its stated themes, which is the animal within us or whatever, are not played out at all. I don't really see why he's acting this way. And I feel like there's a lot of potential there that isn't there. It feels incongruent between the monkey trying to go around and kill people and, it's making me do this because of its animal nature. This is what's deep down inside of all of us, which is a very old hat, almost 50s sounding sort of thing.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking that.
And it's like, you could do a lot more with this, actually. There's a lot there. I mean, it functionally looks like it's got the budget of a TV movie, but like, I think that
it's one of his larger budgets, though. I think I remember reading that.
I mean, that monkey's probably really expensive.
Big salary.
I guess, big salary, lots of training, kind of pooping on everything. I don't know. I mean, if I were a monkey, I'd exploit the hell out of these people. So like, yeah, it's definitely, I think, one of Romero's weaker, but I think but his strengths are still there. And I think that's actually in economical character work. And look, they really try to make this monkey kind of scary, and like I feel it, right? Like I feel the sense of betrayal and things. And maybe we should be on the monkey side. Maybe the humans should like serve the monkeys and not the other way around. Now, there's a whole franchise about this. That
Oh,
makes
that's true. That's true. Well,
um
it also seems like another one of those trademarks, like I mentioned with Romero, where like, the humans aren't the people you're necessarily cheering for.
I mean, to be totally honest, I'm kind of joking. Like
Oh, okay.
the monkey kind of ends up being a bit of a dick. Like I'm actually am cheering for the people. It's just the monkey's cuter than them. So
Right, right.
what am I going to do here? I don't know. I mean, in terms of political themes, I actually can't pull out a lot. I'm sure somebody has, but like I just don't. It's not. I mean, it feels more like there's a deeper psychological story that could have been told with this,
Hmm.
and it's sort of a missed opportunity. It actually feels like in a way. Um, but that's okay because like it's also totally for me at least totally entertaining, and I actually really love how absurd it is. I mean, this is absurd. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
Like it, I think it ends with the monkey running around with like needles and a razor blade that it keeps stealing from people, and entrapping him, and it's like an actual monkey doing these things by and large.
Yeah.
Like there's no monkeys were harmed during the making of this movie. Like the monkey dies. Okay, like at the end of the movie, the monkey does lose. Okay, it doesn't get what it wants. And that is not a real monkey, and you can tell, which is good. But like, yeah, like I'm like, I can almost see it being dangerous because it's just probably about as smart as a human and can move really quickly.
Hmm.
Sure, but like there's this amazing scene where basically there's a battle of wits between him and his wheelchair and the monkey who can still move around and wants him entrapped but can't hurt him, right? Like the monkey
Right.
cannot bring itself to hurt him. There's the bond, but can hurt everybody else. So he's trying to outsmart this monkey, and that's like a kind of a compelling scene. It's absurd, but it's compelling. Like you feel the emotional connection, partially because I guess I'm making an argument for this, partially because they spend enough time with them when things are going well, and you see the relief that he feels. It's better to have a basically a non-human friend be able to do these things that he needs done in the house than the humans, right? There isn't a
Right.
sense of obligation or dependency. It's a different kind of relationship. So he has built up this bond, and it really does mean a lot.
Hmm.
And so in a certain sense that creates as things go badly, that creates some I think creates some actual emotional resonance as things go on. um
Well, again, you're with Romero, like we keep saying, like you're talking about the character development and like the psychological development, including the monkey in this dynamic. You're not highlighting like the awesome kills or the gore or the traditional horror aspects to it, which is of course the genre he's playing in here. You're talking again about the human relationships, even if that's with something that isn't human.
yeah, exactly. And part of what I'm saying is that the underlying thematics of the movie that the movie like yells at you aren't even what's there, which is I think a kind of a failure on Romero's part. But there's a lot of other things you can kind of mine out of if you decide that this is like, you know, kind of a goofy late 80s horror movie.
Yeah.
With that horrible late 80s like music where it's like kind of electronic, but like it just sounds like cheap elevator music. Anyway,
Oh,
um,
yeah. I know what you mean.
yeah, it's just like I don't know what happened, guys. Um,
Mall music.
yeah, it's like basically mall music. But like, you know what? It's perfectly entertaining. I'm sure there's a deeper commentary, like social commentary somebody could drag out of it, but like I don't particularly feel like doing that.
Sure.
But yeah,
It's it's weird how with some of his movies you can feel it and you're like you want to kind of wrestle with those thoughts,
right.
and then other ones you're just like I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, it's partially, I think this is the most graphic. No, that's not true. Season of the Witch. I was going to say the most graphic sex I've seen in one of his movies, but actually,
Oh, interesting.
I think Season of the Witch might have it beat.
Also, from what I'm reading here, it's once again set in Pittsburgh.
Of course.
Yes.
Actually, I take that back. To be totally honest, Martin. Oh boy. All right. Well, anyway, let's strike that one from the.
To be determined later.
Yeah. So what did? Let's. I've got another one, but let's. Should I talk about my second one before we jump into zombies, or?
Yeah, because mine is all just kind of. I was just going to say walking through the dead. That's the wrong way to phrase that. Kind of doing a quick tour of the dead films. So let's save those for a minute. The other one you watched was.
Oh, I watched The Dark Half.
Thad Beaumont has a secret.
I know all about it.
A piece of himself he keeps hidden.
You just don't want to give up George. You become attached to him.
Locked away until he needs it.
These behaviors could be interpreted as schizophrenia.
Away from the light, safe in the shadows.
I wrote those words, and I have no recollection of doing it.
But sometimes secrets take on a life of their own. Thad Beaumont thought he didn't need George Stark anymore.
The American way of death.
That's it.
He served his purpose. Time to lay him to rest. But George is not about to go quietly.
You really don't realize what you're like when you write those books, do you? It's like watching Jekyll turn into Hyde.
We're here to question you in connection with a capital crime.
Evidence says you did it.
George Stark has somehow come to life.
Hello, George.
I can come closer to believing a ghost story than this. You're talking about a man who never was.
He wants to take over your life. Can't you see that?
Based upon a book by Stephen King comes George A. Romero's masterful vision of a nightmare come true.
Are you ready? Just waiting on you.
The Dark Half.
Monkey Shines is from '88, and so I think this is his next movie afterwards.
It's his next feature, because he did an anthology one in '90 with Argento, which I haven't watched, called Two Evil Eyes. But
yeah, I haven't seen that yet either.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: is this The Darker Half at a technical level, like at every level, is a better movie. It's well acted. It actually does deal with the darker half elements of people's psyches more effectively. So in a certain sense, there's thematic resonance between the two films, but one of them, they're both goofy as hell. So this is based off of a Stephen King, so it's another Stephen King sort of part of their ongoing collaboration.
I was going to say, I wanted to kind of track that real quick, because when we did Night Riders, our first episode, Stephen King is in that, credited as like Hoagie Man, because he's a guy in the opening scene eating a hoagie,
right,
talking about how this is all, fake, like wrestling or whatever. And that's '81. So like they have a friendship, at least, that goes back to '81, and then he does Creepshow in '82,
right,
which is the first. I think it's the first time Romero didn't write the script. No, he didn't write There's Always Vanilla. But anyway, yeah, like he and King at that point have like a decade-long professional relationship, and I would assume they were. I didn't look it up, but it seems like they probably got along personally as well.
Yeah, but that's part of what makes it a little weird for me is. It's a combination of their voices. Maybe, I mean, this involves psychic connected evil, basically your psychic emanations of your, I'm going to spoil this. Okay. Just everybody be aware, next few seconds you can go over if you don't want to know what's actually going on here, which actually, to be totally honest, I'm just going to keep talking for a second to give you a little more space. Basically, the first part of the movie, it's not really clear what's going on. But basically, you're dealing with a writer who is, does a lot of artsy crap that doesn't sell. Art's very good. All right, this stuff I probably read. But then he also has like a brutal sort of gangland persona, who basically somebody, what is it? George Stark, basically a pseudonym that he uses for books that have like taken off, right? So you can sort of see how, for instance, this would appeal to, let's say, Stephen King, because this is a story about the nature of writing and who we are and how we relate to the characters that we create.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
and the
yeah, that
dark
makes
at
sense.
half that we put into our stories. And in a sense, I'm sure that Romero can relate to this and connect to this, but since it's about the process of writing, I mean, literally at a certain, well, okay, basically what it turns out is that actually, in reality, at first it looks like there's a series of killings. First, well, basically he gets blackmailed by somebody to reveal that he has a pseudonym, that he has a pseudonym for this, for these books. He basically calls the person's bluff and decides to get rid of this this alternate writer that he's pretending to be, and turn it into a publicity thing. And then people associated with this transition, right? The photographer who's doing the news story, people start to get killed. What is it? Michael Rooker, who's sort of the local cop who's dealing with the situation, thinks it's him. All the evidence points to him, but as we see throughout the movie, it's not him. It's actually the evil parts of himself, which have emanated out into the submerged twin that had to be surgically removed from him. Had been basically like a fetus that had not actually ended up growing. That had to be surgically removed from him when he was like 10 years old, had survived, taken over that body, and become a totally different thing, but of course has the same fingerprints and everything. Yeah, right.
So it's physically two people.
It's physically actually two people.
Okay.
But they can't both exist at the same time long term. The evil one is falling apart and thinks that if the writer keeps writing him, he'll keep going. But one of them has to go. Oh, and sparrows take people to the underworld, which means whenever he's around, there's lots and lots of sparrows.
Oh, nice.
Right. I mean, this is very Kingish, frankly.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not, in a sense, it doesn't feel very Romero. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because none of the themes you're mentioning so far, except for like psychic connections, humans and monkey shines, and then this one. But other than that.
Yeah, but even that wasn't a story that he'd originally written, like Monkey Shines. So like, it's.
Yeah, and he adapted Monkey Shines and then directed it, and then he adapted this King book and directed too. So it wasn't like he worked. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he did work with King adapting it, but like he's got the credit as adapting the story. So presumably he chose it.
He did. It just doesn't, like, if you think about his 70s work or whatever, the sense of indie director, that indie director thing that we keep pointing out about him, isn't really in this one.
Right.
There isn't really a bit of it. It's well made. It's good, despite that sheer goofiness. But what can you say? It's the early 90s, or not despite that, maybe because of it. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. And yeah. I think that the thematics around the nature of artistic endeavor and how we do it and how it relates to ourselves, and there's a lot more thematics, is really well done. It's a better movie than Monkey Shines, but it feels less Romero.
Well, I mean, it has those themes like we talked about with Night Riders, where like Night Riders is about people that are passionate about their art, but that also has that inherently goofy thing like we talked about.
Yeah. So all right. And I actually,
it's kind of a theme that he does kind of like to play with, and is like, okay, so now he's talking about the nature of this art being an author instead of a medieval bike on a knight on a bike, or himself being a filmmaker.
So that's just it. Is I think part of it is you're right, and I did think about that. Like these are themes that he likes to play with.
Mm-hmm.
And
it just may not be effective in this particular vehicle, though.
Oh, I think they're very effective. That's the thing is, I think actually it's well done. I think the thing about it, I'm actually saying it's a good movie. Mm-hmm. I think it's very good. But I think in a sense they may be themes, but they're not the way that he's done it before, and maybe that he's doing something new. But they don't really have the hallmarks that we've been sort of seeing throughout the other movies that we've looked at.
Gotcha.
And won't show up in like the Dead movies. All of them, whether they're the good ones or the not good ones, the later ones, are very clearly Romero.
Mm-hmm.
And with this, I just feel a little less of his voice in it.
Gotcha.
It's the first one where there's no deep you don't feel those deep interrelationships between people. I mean, I feel like everybody's well characterized and they act well, but it's just not quite the same.
Is it because there's not the external apocalyptic level stakes outside of the characters?
I mean, but Monkey Shines, you feel it. And to be totally honest, as threatening as a monkey with a razor blade can be.
That sounds threatening.
It's not quite apocalyptic, let's be honest.
Well, that's true. Yeah, right. If you're in the room, it feels apocalyptic, but not the stakes that we're looking at with some of those other ones.
Yeah. I mean, in a certain sense, I actually think The Dark Half is a considerably better movie than Monkey Shines by a lot. But I actually think I enjoyed Monkey Shines more.
Okay. I haven't seen either, so I need to catch up there.
And I shouldn't say by a lot. I mean, it's better, but I don't think it's like exponentially so.
Yeah.
Well, what did you watch?
Well, I guess, since we are wrapping up our Romero month, we can't not mention the Dead series. So I went through and watched I rewatched Land of the Dead, but then I had never watched Diary of the Dead or Survival of the Dead. So I finished off the Dead series. Actually, I rewatched Night of the Living Dead as well because the commentary version is on Criterion Channel. So we got to talk about, Romero and zombies here to cap it all off.
Yeah.
So the Dark Half, when it came out, I don't have the production budget in front of me, but the box office cracked 10 million. So I feel like it had to have made its money back, maybe a little bit more, because I don't think he ever really got tons of money for a budget. So that comes out in 93. He does a short film in 94. He does a movie called Bruiser in 2000, which doesn't really make much of a splash. I don't know if anybody even remembers that one. And then in 2005, he jumps back in with Land of the Dead, 2007, Diary of the Dead, 2009, Survival of the Dead. So he does those back to back to back. But if we're going to talk about the Dead, I think we maybe want to say a couple things about the original trilogy before jumping into the new-ish trilogy of that, which is kind of hard to keep track of some of his timelines because I listened to the commentary on Land, Diary of Survival, and they're good commentary tracks, but it gets a little confusing with the timeline he's playing with.
So is he? Wait, are they all supposed to be in the same universe?
I think so. I mean, they're all, zombie apocalypse is breaking out, but to varying degrees. But yeah, well, okay, well, so yeah, universe-wise, Diary of the Dead takes place in the same universe, but just a little bit later than Night of the Living Dead.
Okay.
So yeah, Diary, like Land, I'd have to check my notes again. I can't remember, but like Land of the Dead obviously takes place during a zombie apocalypse, but then Diary of the Dead takes place shortly. It says like shortly after the events of the original trilogy. I'm like, but this is like there's cell phones and video cameras. Like anyway, it's his movies. That's what he decided to do with them. But yeah, they're all the same Dead universe because there's zombie apocalypse going on. But they're not. Yeah, they don't directly be like, oh, it's like that other incident over in Pittsburgh from a few years ago, or oh, it's like those people that were trapped in the mall. And actually, I'm not 100% sure that works because in Survival of the Dead, they're surprised when zombies show up. And I feel like if it's a few years after the fact, it'd be like, oh, the zombies are, here now. Or it wouldn't be just like, zombies? What?
Yeah, I think people will kind of know that one happened.
So, yeah, timeline. Let's just ignore the timeline part then because I don't really know how they actually all tie together. But obviously, it kicks it all off. Night of the Living Dead, 68, becomes the godfather of the modern zombie film. I feel like that's a pretty well covered
and a lot of modern horror, frankly.
Oh yeah. It's pretty well covered. Obviously, if you're listening to a politics podcast, we're talking about Romero and horror films in this particular month. It breaks a lot of barriers as far as racism goes too. You have a black lead character who stands up to a horde of zombies, predominantly white zombies, and then is taken out by a mob of white people who actually
look like a lynch mob.
They're a lynch mob, yeah. And regardless of like the racial politics there, that's an organized group that is successful against a zombie uprising. Just so happens they take out some innocents along the way.
Yes.
Including our main character at the end.
I mean, part of it is in this first movie, his social conscience, he always seems to say that this first one wasn't meant, like the racial politics weren't meant to be there, that he was just the best actor among their friends, which I think is probably true. But also, like,
he's the best actor in the movie, I think. The performance-wise, you're like, that's solid.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the other ones are a little rough around the edges. That's perfectly fine. I still love the movie.
Oh, it literally doesn't matter at all. No. But I think, part of it is the fact that we will destroy ourselves multiple times over in this movie is already there.
Yeah.
And also the thematics, of both the racial politics of both having a black lead, but also the racial politics in the film, and then of course the immediate, the the image at the end is really powerful. Revolutionary movie.
Yeah.
So Dawn of the Dead
follows it up. 78, full 10 years later. After Martin, after Crazies, after Season of the Witch, after Amusement Park, we get Dawn of the Dead.
Right.
Setting them all, political, social allegory, consumerism. It's like we said, I keep thinking of Romero as being like this politically subtle filmmaker, but really not
no,
so much.
He's completely,
it's right there.
It's completely unsubtle. Well, it's not just them all. I mean, the opening scene is riot cops fighting their way through, I think mainly Black and Puerto Rican apartment complex in New York, in which they're basically doing counterinsurgency.
Yeah.
And it's not subtle what's going on. It's not subtle about the violence. It's not subtle about, the way that the police and the state operate in society. Like, it's very clear what he's doing.
I forgot about that opening. You're right.
And then sort of consumerism.
Yeah.
And, and basically a small indie movie with him hanging out in a mall. What would you do if you were trapped in a mall forever? I don't know.
Well, at a certain point, you'd have some fun. Yeah, that's actually, I forgot about that opening. That threw me for a loop there when you said that. I forgot all about that part. Well, also, actually, I did write a note of this in my film journal here. This Dawn of the Dead supposedly takes place 3 weeks after the first movie, even though it's 10 years later in our time. So maybe he is playing with. He's created this whole thing. I maybe just because I don't know his timeline here and how what the threads are doesn't mean they're not there.
Right.
But yeah. Actually, and then Dawn of the Dead was actually the first one I saw.
Huh. Well, that's not surprising. It's sort of the more famous one.
Yeah. So that's 78. Much less time in between. Oh, did you have more on Dawn?
Well, I was going to say, I think it's generally would be considered his masterpiece, like his greatest film.
It is in my book, but I think it's part of those two, like whatever album you're listening to that gets you into a band tends to be like, oh, that's my favorite album, just because like it's the one that sparked it.
Yeah, but I think generally,
but it's also generally, culturally, it's also kind of thought of that way too. But for me, it's my favorite of his as well.
So then 85,
Day of the Dead.
He's gotten funding to do movies, but he had to make another zombie movie.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about some of this before, especially in our first episode.
Yeah, the Night Riders episode.
Generally was considered the weaker of the original trilogy. That has been reevaluated. It's one that I've brought up repeatedly on this show as the point where I realized that he's a small school indie director.
Mm-hmm.
The one in some ways that's most accomplished, Tom Savini, who's his famous gore guy, reaches a peak which is just incredible. The zombies in this movie are absolutely amazing. And it's, in this, the themes have switched more to our Reagan era themes, right? They're very much about militarism and paranoia and out of control machismo.
Mm-hmm.
And which I don't know, I think it's a great movie. I think it compares to the other two. I don't think it's necessarily better than Dawn, but I think it fits well, and as a loose trilogy dealing with, frankly, different social themes in each one, along with the fact that every single time humans will destroy themselves. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, George. I really appreciate that. I'm feeling really good right now in nearly 2022. It's great. What do you think of
this one? Hits weird because it's you have soldiers and scientists, and in this particular one, it's set predominantly in an underground facility. Not in Pittsburgh though. I want to say it's like in Florida or something.
It's in Florida, yeah.
Florida, okay. And it's scientists racing to find a solution to a zombie pandemic, which is the way it's worded in the description. And I was like, another one of those things that just rings differently to my ears now than it would have 2 years ago.
Except they're kind of not, because everybody's basically sort of lost it at this point. And
I wanted to mention that because it comes up in the newer trilogy too. This idea of like, there will be a scientific solution to this zombie pandemic.
Yeah, I don't think they actually get it even close in this movie. And they also
but that's what they're working on, though.
Yeah, they're kind of, except like they actually are, but part of it is like basically one of the scientists, the lead scientist, is functionally out of his mind. He's like, the alpha scientist in the room.
Yeah, he's nicknamed Frankenstein, isn't he?
Yeah, he's nicknamed Frankenstein. He's basically he's trying to train them, right? And this is another thing that Romero starts bringing in more and more in the later ones, which is zombies as people, basically. That zombies have personalities and can be sort of, there's something still there.
Yeah, put a pin in that because that's going to come up very
lot.
very quickly.
Yeah. So, this is the sort of, I think this is really the first time he starts playing with that, like, seriously. I mean, you can see there's just one scene in Dawn where there's an indication of like memories being retained. But it is sort of like, I mean, like, are they, like, the world has ended, right? Like, I mean, I think at the beginning of this movie, they say the zombies outnumber us, like 1 to 400,000.
400,000, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you do.
Right. Well, it's that, thread of hope that humanity has to hang on to, because otherwise, like, why not just run out and join the crowd? Well, also, I mean, that speaks to the stakes too. Like, there's, that is a apocalyptic, why are we even trying stakes in this story? And then you have the showdown between, scientists and soldiers. I looked up at this a little bit since our first recording, because we mentioned on our Night Riders episode how he had like a 3-picture deal, and he chose to do Night Riders first and then Creepshow. And then when it came time for this one, he ended up going with just filming on a lower budget and release it without a rating. So I don't think it ended up being part of his 3-picture deal in the long run, because he was worried about having to curb the violence to make sure there was an R rating from the MPAA to make sure it was commercially viable, which ended up not mattering because it was. They shot it for like $3.5 million and grossed like almost 40, I think, something like that. So it was fine because, turns out in 85 people are okay with a certain level of gore in their movies. And also, like you said, Savini in there doing his magic and everything else. So I got a quote from him. He described this one as he wanted to make the Gone with the Wind of zombie movies. I don't 100% know what that means, but I have a few other quotes where he's talking about what he was doing with his other other Dead films in the 2000s. Where I was like, okay, George, whatever.
Right. It's sort of starting to lose it. I mean, Land is the one that I've seen of his later ones.
Okay. Land comes out in, what was that, like 07, I think. No, Land is 05. I'm sorry. Land is 05.
05, yeah.
The world as we know it.
They must be destroyed.
Is no more.
Cities are under siege.
The land of the living has become.
Feeding up human flesh.
The land of the dead.
If these creatures ever develop the power to think, to reason,
we're all dead.
In one last outpost.
It was my ingenuity that took an old world and made it into something new.
We have survived.
Rivers protect us on 2 sides?
I put up the fences to make it safe.
And these fences go all the way across?
Both ways.
But if the living can adapt...
Things are changing. These guys are not just walking.
So can the dead.
It's like they're pretending to be alive.
They're mindless walking corpses. They'll never get across the river.
They're moving toward the city.
There's nothing there, man.
They're communicating. They're thinking. We're going back to see if we can help. Trouble?
In a world where the dead are returning to life, the word trouble loses much of its meaning.
I was pretty hyped for this one because it was, Romero's back. Also at the time, and still currently, big John Leguizamo fan. So that always helps out a movie in my book. It's definitely the best of the new 3. And I was just checking my notes here. Yeah, so he says this takes place 3 years after the initial outbreak. And I pulled so Land of the Dead is Dennis Hopper. He's in like a walled off city. not city, walled off like complex with a giant high rise where the rich people live. And he's got a bunch of people that are just scared to death of what's outside the walls, you know, the zombie hordes. And they're living so precariously, they will do whatever they can to stay safe inside the wall, which is basically just providing for all the rich that are inside, living a life of luxury still. No metaphor there, I'm sure.
So the theme of this movie is class.
Yeah. It's I mean, before this comes out before Snowpiercer, which obviously did it way better. But it's that kind of thing where it's almost tiered by floor rather than by train car in Snowpiercer.
Yeah, no,
not exactly, but you see what I'm going there. It's called Fiddler's Green. I don't know if that's a reference to anything. It sounds like the name of something from folklore because I don't know. It sounds like it.
I mean, is this Pittsburgh?
But it's Pittsburgh, yeah.
Yeah. So
it's very like feudal kind of style government here. One of the nitpicks I have is you have Dennis Hopper being like the wealthy guy running this whole Fiddler's Green thing. Let him choose some scenery. And he doesn't really.
That does seem like... So I haven't seen this in a long time, and I was much less of a movie fan then, so I think now I probably would appreciate that more. I mean, I consider it a good movie. I don't think it's a great movie. I don't think it's a very good movie, but it's like it's good. And I mean, I kind of feel like it's more of a 10 years after than 3 years after. I don't mean to...
I'm just going by what he said on the commentary track.
The society is like pretty well put together at this point.
Just technology-wise, it jumped leaps from 68.
Yeah.
But whatever, it's his show. So I pulled this quote from the commentary track. This is from Romero, from Land of the Dead. It came up, one of the producers or somebody else that was on the track with him was asking about like the role of money in this, because he actually addresses the role of money in this particular system. Like you said, it's about class in this luxury high rise, rich and powerful versus like the poor outside. And Romero's response was, well, the rich were regrouping. The Republicans were back and money mattered again, but only in those protected communities. So that's kind of the sandbox he's playing with this whole Fiddler's Green thing. And obviously, eventually the zombies are going to break through and they're going to get in. And then when they do, there's actually a lot of scenes that look very much out of Dawn of the Dead, because they start attacking all these rich assholes that are just in the lobby area, a very mall-like area, a lot of glass storefronts, and a lot of throats, faces, ears, a lot of biting from the zombies.
Yeah,
so I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that because I don't remember that really coming up. Like Dawn of the Dead, obviously you're in a mall, but like who gives a shit? Nobody needs money. You just break the glass and take what you want.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it is the wonderland of this sort of situation, right? Like you're
right.
Well, how do I put this? It speaks to all the strengths of Dawn in a sense, that there's so much you can work with here. But yeah, like it is sort of, I mean, that's part of the conceit is that, what would you do, right, in that situation where where you have all the things you need, but you can't go outside, where you're under siege. Whereas this is very much like painting our society. I think it's done well, and I more or less, I think it's an interesting idea, not 100% like original at this point, but like whatever, George can do whatever the hell he wants, right?
That's a really good way to word it, because actually that's also a perfect segue into another quote I pulled from the commentary, because he's directly addressing that, where I was like, you know what? His quote about the themes he was working with in this movie, I think the quote is better than the way it actually came about on screen. And actually, he even references Braddock in this quote, which is the town where Martin was set, or at least filmed. I think it was also set there too, right outside Pittsburgh, from our previous episode. So Romero, talking about the themes of Land of the Dead, said, nowadays there are still people living in towns like Braddock saying, the mills will reopen someday, don't worry about it. It's all about lost potential. It was a thriving immigrant community. It was sort of the industrial American dream, but what nobody realized at the time was that it was the Carnegies and those boys who were keeping the city going. It seemed for a while like Pittsburgh was built on the backs of workers, but it never really was. Those people have always been second-class citizens, and the town has always been, at its core, very wealthy. So there's a little bit of that in this movie, too. It just so happens that now it's a reflection of the entire country.
I don't know if I totally agree with that.
No, but I think that's interesting. That's what he's saying he's working with within this story. And I was like, well, that's a little bit more an interesting thought than I think comes through in the script in this particular case.
Yeah, I mean, as an analysis of like part of it is that they're still those people are still wealthy and they're still exploiting workers. They're just not exploiting them there. That's what happened. I mean, part of it is, this is a quote, but basically, the worst thing under capitalism, the worst thing is to not be exploited under capitalism, right? Because if you're not exploited, then you don't live.
Right.
And that's what happened to those communities. It's not, part of it, and there is a huge amount of residual wealth in places like that, right? I mean, Cleveland's the same way, but a lot of their money is being made somewhere else, or they don't need your labor anymore. But they were built off the backs of those workers. Like the wealth.
Yeah, that's a weird part of that quote where I was like, no, it was.
Yeah. It's a weird way of putting that point.
Yeah. Well, it's also, he's just like shooting the shit on a commentary track. So I don't know how like thought out that statement really was.
I'm not asking for the political economy of the Rust Belt thesis.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, see the book you were referencing earlier.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. There we go.
So then we have in 2000 and now we're in 2007, Diary of the Dead.
Two news agencies are reporting accounts of the dead returning to life.
What's that?
What was that?
You can't talk about it being an epidemic. Being an epidemic.
What is this about, Jason?
This turns out to be a big thing. I just want to record it.
Prepared for this sort of failure by government agencies, support organizations.
Look.
It looks hurt.
It's all burned up.
The problem doesn't seem to be that people are waking up dead. The dead people are waking up.
It's not going down! Shoot in the head! No, please!
They're not getting the truth from anybody else. All that news is a pack of lies.
I'm dealing with this crisis.
This one I was a sucker for because I adore found footage movies. I know most of them are terrible. Something about the aesthetic, I dig it.
I don't know about this podcast, man. I just don't know.
I'm a fan of Romero. I'm a sucker for found footage films. So I was like, great, sign me up for this one. It's not a great found footage film, but it's in that, it's in Romero's wheelhouse. And I was like, all right, fine. I feel like he really ups the gore on this one, even from Land of the Dead, which is kind of, interesting, but also he knows what crowd he's got. By 2007, he's been going to, horror conventions. He's aware of his reputation. He knows he's the zombie guy, the godfather of zombie films for this one. So yeah, it's found footage, and what it's doing in this one, the way that we've talked about, like the rampant consumerism, the racial politics of the first one, the soldiers versus scientists of Day of the Dead. In this one, it's taking aim straight at the media in 2007. Like MySpace is a big deal in this one, and like how people can get the truth out to the masses through social media. Remember that quaint time for a minute there? When it wasn't just, QAnon can spread like wildfire on social media. It was like, we're going to get the truth out. This is what's really happening. And this is because the quote unquote government is denying that anything is going on zombie wise.
Oh my God. Well, this is a little too.
That's why the timeline gets really fucked up with this one. Like I fine, indict the media by all means. So it's a takedown of corporate media, but it's like corporate media versus social media to an extent in the MySpace era via found footage.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Pirate Bay, whatever. I mean, like, I think, part of it is now, yes, like social media is deeply coercive and destructive in many ways, but I'm still getting a lot of information from Twitter. Like
oh, sure.
It's all about how you do it.
Right. It's a tool. So, you could use it for good or evil or whatever, or cat memes, whatever you want to do with it. Here's the thing with this one, though. So one of the things we've been talking about, the thread here is, can people get organized collectively and survive? These are not like the World War Z zombies. They're still just slow moving zombies. Oh, and then also, so the thing with Land of the Dead, which I think is the contention some people have, is that you can see there's like zombie main characters that you recognize. The main one is like a pretty intimidating shaved head black guy. There's like a white girl, I think, who's dressed as a cheerleader or something. I forget. But like you see them like figure out how to use a gun. How, like they figure out how to use tools. Like you see their evolution, which I was like, I'm fine with that. Like also, if you're, this guy invented the genre. If he wants to make zombies start like you said, it even pops up in Day of the Dead. Like these like residual memories start to come back of like, oh, they're human or not, or are you remembering stuff? So the zombies are a main character in Land of the Dead from the perspective of like you're giving a little bit of not like I guess sort of empathy, but like there's a character arc to the zombies in Land of the Dead.
Yeah.
You don't get that in Diary. It's back to just humans and can you collectively work together to keep your community safe? And in Diary of the Dead, there is a group that does that. At one point, they're in like an RV. It's a bunch of film students, which, that part kind of sucks. And they're just constantly filming. It's so on the nose. I was like, oh my God. And I recognized dialogue from when I was a film student. I was like, okay, yeah, that's how we talk. Okay, damn it. Really got our number. Because you're pretentious at that age. You think you know it all and you're just, whatever.
Unlike our age where we actually know it all.
Oh, fuck yeah. Like we're not just putting all of our thoughts on, a podcast feed as if we know what we're talking about. No pretension there. How long have we been talking about Romero and random shit now? Hour, whatever. So what's cool in this one is at one point they're in a mobile home. Oh, they also have their film professor who's British and he's got some repressed war trauma and skills with like a bow and arrow for some reason.
Which war?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know the timeline for this.
I mean, with the Falklands?
Falklands war? Like, I don't know. Was he using a bow and arrow in the Falklands? That doesn't make any sense.
I mean, well, it could have been Iraq or Afghanistan at this point.
I don't believe they mention it. He just mentions like he has some war experiences. I don't know. So anyway, they're in an RV traveling around, and at one point they're in a city and they're looking for supplies, and they end up on this like this big warehouse kind of a building, and it's in this it's in a poor neighborhood, and there is a bunch of people from this neighborhood who are all African Americans who have banded together and they've locked the fuck down this warehouse. And they're full of weapons. They've got all the food. They got food, supplies, everything. And then the zombies show up. They pick them off from the rooftop, out the windows, and they're safe. They're secure. They're locked down.
Yeah.
And when they offer, like, oh, you guys want to go with us? The one character, this is just a quick scene in the movie or segment. They're like, oh, do you want to go with us? Like, we're going to head to whatever. And he's like, fuck no. We're safe here. And for the first time in our lives, we have power. And then they leave. The film students leave.
Wow.
I wanted that movie.
You want the movie about them?
Yes. You've secured the warehouse. You've collectively gotten your shit together with your community, and you've locked it down. You're safe. You have supplies, and then this whole thing of like, yeah, we have power right now. I'm not leaving. We're safe, and we have power for the first time.
I mean, I think a lot of The Walking Dead, which I've never really watched very much, is sort of about that. But I think, there's another zombie movie.
You mean Survival of the Dead?
Yes. Oh, I was just going to mention a different zombie. I don't know if you've ever heard of Blood Quantum.
I don't think so.
Pretty new, but it's basically set on a native reservation. I'm thinking Canada, and it's a zombie apocalypse scenario where the native people are the only ones immune to the zombies. Like they can't become zombies. It has so much potential playing with those sorts of ideas.
Yeah,
so much potential. It doesn't end up working. They kind of blow it pretty bad, but still, it's a great idea.
Yeah. Blood Quantum 2019. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll check that one out.
You still check it out. I mean, like it's what if all the colonizers just became zombies for real? Anyway,
one last one is Survival of the Dead, which again the randomness with Romero, where you're like, oh wait, so Day of the Dead was going to be your Gone with the Wind of zombie movies. Okay, I don't really know what that means, but fine, it's your show, buddy. I'll watch it. He says that Survival of the Dead is based on or inspired by the film The Big Country. It's a William Wyler Western from 1958. It's a feud between two families.
Sure.
Fine.
Last time anyone counted, 53 million people were dying every year. 150,000 every day, 107 every minute. It had become an us versus them world. All we were looking for was a place where there was no them.
Lousy times make lousy people.
All the wrong people are dying.
This island needs to be rid of them.
We like it here. We think the best way of seeing this through is here. We don't want no place. We want some place.
Like where?
Like an island.
It's an island off the coast of Delaware. Come on over.
Only families ever lived on this island were yours and mine. No strangers.
What are you gonna do with them?
They're Muldoons.
souls. It's up to me to save them.
You can't save a person who's already dead.
Somebody's gonna find a cure for this.
This, I would probably say, is my least favorite of all the Dead ones. It is interesting. You have the military characters from Diary of the Dead. I think I want to say they're National Guard, or they're posing as National Guard, and they rob the film students in their RV of all their supplies. And they're like, "Oh, thank God, the authorities are here. Soldiers, we're safe." And they're like, they draw their guns, like, "Yeah, give us all your shit. We're out of here." And they're like, "Oh, damn, maybe we can't trust authorities." So those are the main characters in Survival of the Dead, and then they stumble upon this video online of a dude saying like, "Hey, come to this island. It's zombie free. We have our own little thing going." It's like, oh, hey, they're getting their shit together. They're gonna, they got a spot where like, oh, the humans are fine, whatever, it's zombie free. Of course, it's not. And they go to this island, and it's like two warring factions. It's two warring like Irish families in this one. Like, that's an interesting direction to go with your zombie apocalypse film series
in the 2000s. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it a Western? It's like you took the Western idea and like a little much. Like, okay, we'll literally just do this.
Okay, so I'm glad you said the Western thing. The final scene of this movie is both of the patriarchs of these two families are now zombies, and the shot is them like the right on the horizon. It's both of them right there with guns, like ready to still shoot each other, even as zombies. Giant ass full moon coming up over the horizon right by, like, it's an amazing shot. We're like, damn, I wish this movie was better, because that's a kick-ass ending. And they're still like retaining this whole like, I hate you, and my hatred of you and your family overrides the fact that I'm now a zombie with a barely functioning brain.
It's kind of sad that that's the last of that theme. I'm actually never really liked the active brain zombie idea, particularly. Like,
well, they're working on that in this one too, because one of the patriarchs, like his daughter, actually it's twins. One of them's a zombie, one isn't, and they have like their family is chained up, and there's this whole idea of like, I'm just going to keep my zombie family members chained up, so that way when a cure is found, I can just cure them. So they really play with that, but then also like try to train them, like especially when you have twins, like they play into the whole like, oh, my twin's a zombie, maybe she'll recognize me because we're twins. We have this twin bond. It doesn't, work, but.
Yeah.
This one though was quite the flop. Again, he's not going with crazy budgets on the later three zombie ones. $4 million on this one, but grossed like $400,000.
Brutal.
Ouch.
So, I guess if we're ready for this, how do we sum this all up? How do we sum up this as an exercise that we've been doing here? I think by one of the great modern political directors, right? American political directors, at least, and one of the the architects of our culture, in a way that it's very hard to find another director who's greater and who never really got that big a budget and had some hits in the 70s and then kind of just sort of made it along.
Yeah, I don't want to say like diminishing returns, because like there's still moments there where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's pretty sweet, but. Yeah, I think started off very, very strong for quite a while, actually, too. Definitely had some themes that he really liked to play around with. And even though he's not overtly saying that he's, a political director, I think maybe it's just part of his personal DNA. And it comes through in the work he does.
Yeah. I tend to think, I don't know. No, there's too much intentionality by part of it is there's so much social commentary in all of the movies that not all of them, but certainly in all the 70s ones, there's so much going on. I think it's totally intentional. And then, I don't think it's just in his DNA in the sense of like, it comes out in his work. I think he's, he wants to say something with this stuff.
I just meant like I think he's a politically engaged individual.
Yeah.
And not that he's like an activist or on the streets like that, but just like he's, like we mentioned, like it feels like a humanist.
Yeah.
And he's just playing in the sandbox of like zombie and horror, because that is generally what worked with him right out of the gate.
Yeah. And I think you pointed out, when you listen to him talk, he loves the blood and guts too.
Sure.
So it's not like he's, there is like the difficulty of like watching when he has done a non-horror movie, it doesn't really go anywhere, so he's sort of forced back into horror.
He
But
doesn't go
also,
anywhere like financially.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
mind you, when he decides not to, I mean, other than that first one, which I think he disavows and he didn't write, but we're talking about.
Oh, there's always vanilla.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
When you look at Night Riders, like, no wonder, right? Like, I mean, we talked extensively about this movie, but like, it's both really endearing and not surprising that it doesn't go anywhere.
Right. Well, we were saying, like, it's a hard sell.
It's incredibly hard to sell.
Yeah, but it's worthwhile if you sit down and spend 2.5 hours, whatever
hours of it. But like he's I think he's a really interesting figure that has gotten all the appreciation he deserves in a lot of ways, despite all of his, I think, probably frustrations to a certain degree in career wise.
Yeah,
to an extent, at least. I mean, but yeah, I think part of what our argument has been, and we made this argument last year, and I think how we probably played it to death completely, is that there's more to him than even this is funny first, more to him than just the social commentary, the like very obvious, well done, but very obvious social commentary, and more to him than being a great horror director.
Right.
Like you said, he's a humanist. He's an art movie director who wants to talk about people and their relationships, and that's that's worth noting. So that's our I think that's our thesis here, and
I think so too.
I think we're ready to go here. So I kind of am a little tired of theme months, to be totally honest. I just want to watch whatever the hell I want to watch, but we're gonna have another theme month because you know what next month is.
It's more like a film community obligation in November.
It's Noirvember, and I think I mentioned this because I sort of started Noirvember early by watching some noir horrors that were doing the best they could.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a theme for our episodes next month. We're really excited with this one. I've had a list on my letterbox to do this theme for a really long time. So we're going to talk about noir and capitalism.
There we go.
And if you want to watch along, our first episode, we will be watching Night in the City, a film that if you've been listening to this podcast since the beginning, you'll know that I love, and that that we both have enjoyed.
Yeah.
And Mildred Pierce,
which I have not seen, and I really should have by now.
I mean,
I'm gonna correct that right away.
Joan Crawford, kind of the top. So these are basically, I think we're going to be sticking basically to classic noirs.
I think so. I think
our second episode, just to actually, just to give everybody a heads up, our second episode is pushing that limit. I have to admit, we'll be doing Underworld USA by Samuel Fuller.
Yeah,
which is from 1961. So at the very, very, very tail end of the original sort of noir cycle.
Last gasp of the original noir.
Right, and Never Let Go. If you've ever wanted to see Peter Sellers be a real creep from 1960. Yes. So that'll be second episode of the month.
Sweet. Well, before we sign off, we always like to remind folks to rate and review the show in whatever podcast app you're using. And if you enjoy the show or our themes or a particular episode, tell a friend or two. We are up and running on the usual social media, blah, blah, blah. Just check the show links and you can check us out there. Until next time, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Isaac. And look, I always say this, stay safe out there because this is Halloween. Okay? Hopefully you made it through this Halloween. You were not mauled by a werewolf. You are not now a vampire unless you wanted to be a vampire, which is fair, but like then you're going to kind of wreak death upon society. And like, is that really fair to everyone else? I don't know. Hopefully you're not zombified. Hopefully you don't get cursed and or trapped in a demonic basement and or possessed. All of these things are possible, or just stabbed by some asshole in a mask. These things happen. So like, who may or may not be the embodiment of evil. Probably not. He's probably just an asshole. So, stay safe out there. Really.